native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, as they was, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. But when the Jews opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I'm clear of my responsibility. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." Then Paul left the synagogue and went next door to the house of Titius Justus, a worshipper of God. Crispus, the synagogue ruler, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and many of the Corinthians who heard him believed and were baptized. One night the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. "Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city." So Paul stayed for 1.5 years, teaching them the word of God. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him into court. "This man," they charged, "is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law." Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallio said to the Jews, "If you Jews were making a complaint about some misdemeanor or serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names and your own law, settle the matter yourselves. I will not be a judge of such things." So he had them ejected from the court. Then they all turned on Sosthenes, the synagogue ruler, and beat him in front of the court. But Gallio showed no concern whatever.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Just want to warn you that if you see me shaking my clothes at any point, you'll know that I am disapproving of something.
How fortunate that we're online and we can just see our heads.
Verse 6.
Very good. So we are looking at this now. Paul has left Athens, and we think he's left a significant church there. Actually, as he's gone on to Corinth, which is another major city in Greece, and Corinth is an interesting city for him to go to. It also shows us that in his journeying, Timothy and Silas haven't caught up with him yet in Athens, so they must have come to Athens and then found Paul not there, and then moved on to Corinth. And Corinth was a city that was, in the Roman Empire, one of the most debased cities. There was a phrase in Roman literature that was to play the Corinthian was for someone to lack morals and be absolutely immoral sexually and in so many other different ways. So there was a reputation the city had for being one of the most debased cities in the Roman Empire, and in actual fact, people, when they wanted to say someone was being immoral, accused them of being from Corinth. And so Paul is entering a city that is known for its wrongdoing. It had 2 temples, one either side. In one, there was worship done through prostitutes. On the other side, it was pedophilia and prostitution as well. And you had all of this as part of the worship scene and the idolatry of Corinth. And so Corinth was a pretty debased place, to say the least. And it's into that city that Paul's come, and a city with a reputation that Paul probably knew before he arrived. And that's where he's ministering into. The whole book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, is teaching the church there that's founded by Paul in this time, and helping them work through some of their difficulties, and actually help them become more effective in the city as well. So so there's a bit of a summary there. I think it's interesting, Paul going there, Paul preaching again, and actually, meeting Priscilla and Aquila, and also a little bit of background on that. I've put it in the notes, maybe twice, but Claudius, who was the emperor then, his expulsion of the Jews in AD 49. So this kind of dates round about where Paul is, and the kind of date that he arrives in Corinth is after this point. But in AD 49 seems to have resulted from a disturbance in Jewish synagogues created by the Christian message. Aquila and Priscilla had much in common with Paul, being tent makers as well. So Paul obviously earned his income by making tents wherever he went, and so it shows at some point Paul stops making tents and actually teaches full time, and you see this happening in Corinth as well. And there's a lot happening, so I'll not wade into it too much. I'll open it up and leave it for you guys to see what has jumped out to you, what stands out to you about this. And so over to you. Go for it, Leslie. That's a very quick hand.
My hand doesn't seem to work anymore.
Well, so long as you don't shake your clothes out at your computer, we'll be all right. Go for it, Leslie.
I was just noticing again, I say this so often that we just read the words, don't we? And they sort of flow over our heads. But I was noticing that the Jews have been expelled. Where did I read that? Just read it. From.
Could I just stop you there for a moment, Leslie? We're getting a bit of interference. I'm just wondering, could everyone just mute for a moment, and we'll see. Hopefully it's not me. There we go. I've muted everybody. It's all gone. So if you just unmute yourself before you speak, we'll do that for a bit and see if that just clears it up, rather than find some exactly where it's coming from. So go for it, Leslie.
Right, I have the power here. I'm just looking for where I read it as I was reading, that they've been expelled.
Yeah.
Where was that?
It's in the notes.
Sorry.
And it's also in verse 2, is it?
Oh yes, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. And we read that, but we see on the news at the moment the Ukrainian issue, where we actually see that people have been expelled from somewhere, and the heartache and the upheaval that goes through. And I was just reminded of that with this little verse 2, where we're just reading the words on the page, and it's easy to just skip over that and not sort of get hold of the fact that must have been a really difficult thing, to be expelled from where you've lived all your life just because you're of a particular persuasion.
Yeah. Whether
it's a religion or a race or whatever. So that's my first.
Yeah. I think like we found so often, a little phrase of Luke's writing, and actually behind it there's a lot of, like he goes, and they were beaten, and then you look at how they were beaten, there's a huge thing behind that, but Luke chooses not to focus on it. And here you've got behind this disruption out of Rome, this huge disruption, as we know, but actually Luke just says, yeah, they were kicked out of Rome, that's why they were there. But there's a whole load of turmoil behind that. Right, anyone else want to chip in?
I'll just say that it's... Oh, sorry, go ahead, David.
No, you go.
Go on, Shing.
Oh, it strikes me that what Paul says, it's almost like he's giving up, initially. Paul, you've said, is quite an intellectual person, and he's used all kinds of... used his knowledge and, the Holy Spirit to persuade people with using different means to follow Jesus and the Lord. And now he's actually giving up, saying, your blood will be on your heads. I'm innocent, and now I will go to the Gentiles. There are almost limits, I guess, because he's human and of the flesh. And it's great that the Lord enlightened him with the Holy Spirit, telling him not to give up.
Yeah.
But
that's a really good point. And I think the kind of like when you say something strong, like, right, that's it, line drawn in the sand, and actually I'm off. It does something to the audience as well. It makes them think, right, where am I with this? They may have been arguing or argumentative. It makes them decide which side they're on. It brings a sharp edge to it. I remember I was once in my first church when I was 20 years old, and everyone in the church wanted a different answer. And I felt there was an answer to a situation, and I went and visited everybody in the church, talked about it, loads of things, and everyone wanted different things, and I was feeling terrible torment. And I phoned my dad, or chatted to my dad, I think he visited me, and he just said, just make a decision, say that's what I want to do. If you don't want to do that, we won't do it. and I used those exact words, and the whole meeting turned round. And I think in some of these things where you make a decision and stick to it, that's a very powerful thing. It draws a sharp line in the sand, and I think that's very effective. And I also, as you said, Shing, to find God encouraging him is just incredible. Right, David, then Steve, and then Leslie.
Yeah, I'm just noting that he reasoned again in the synagogue. He's not stating or anything like that. There's this. I think Shing said he's an intellectual, so he reasons with people. But you don't have to be an intellectual to reason with people, I don't think. But I was just thinking earlier that he went to Thessalonica or Thessalonica, depending on where you come from. And he writes a letter to the Thessalonians. He writes a letter to the Corinthians. It would have been very interesting for him to read a letter from him to the Athenians, I think, and his argument in that side. But it's interesting how he does this. And the other thing that struck me was, Leslie's point about the Jews being expelled from Rome. They actually came back, didn't they? Because in the book of Romans, he's actually speaking to a split church there with Jews and Gentiles. So they got. I think I seem to remember from my history lessons they actually got permission to return. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, there we go.
Yeah. And I think if I remember my history as well, they returned, and that prompted the need for the book of Romans to bring a Gentile church and a Jewish church back together and explain the basics, and so they could be united. Right. Thanks, David. Steve?
Yeah, I love the point that David brought, and it almost, there's no point in me asking this, but it's the same thing that David's raised, or the same questions that it's in another way. I'll put it anyway, because we've got people that are, intellectuals. So don't exclude yourself from this. Any thoughts here? You're all intellectuals because you've got thoughts. Simple. Yeah. So here we go. And I thought it's something that I've been seeing. So to get straight to the point, Shing, I see an intellectual. Don't get me wrong, they're all intellectual. Anything that thinks is human is an intellectual, full stop. Okay, verse 4. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. Okay, who are we talking about? Well, it's Paul, I'm pretty sure. The question is this: is that a sin?
Well, I got lost there.
Sorry,
what is a sin? I mean,
Yeah,
what are you pointing at?
Yeah, thank you, David. Thanks for my assistant and my compadre and my brother. I mean, yeah. So I'll let you think about it all.
Okay, so
I think what you're saying, Steve, is preaching on a Sabbath a sin. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, I just mute myself because I'm a man that needs to be muted. Okay, is it a sin? Yes, that is it in a nutshell. It's so in the small and the large. It's like, yes, it is fully it. If you're saying, is it on the, and you know, that small question, that's right, and that's. It's mad the way the universe works. In that small question, it's the whole universe.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
If that helps you.
So what I think let's be careful here. We all have brains, so therefore we all use our intellect. So let's not put people in categories of intellectuals and not in this context. We just keep it open, not put people in boxes. I think also with this. I think what Paul's question to these guys, I think, is he's basically, he shook out, your blood be on your own heads, I'm innocent, I'll now go to the Gentiles. There's a lot contained in that. Is that what you're saying, Steve? And so yeah.
It's amazing when you think you should. It's time to mute, and then suddenly, oh sorry, I got unmute. Yeah. It's just like yes. So sorry, just recap the question in a phrase. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say in what Paul was doing, it contains a lot in his shaking out his garments, in his response to them, and actually, that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Obviously, what he does contains a lot.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think Steve is querying the preaching on the Sabbath, whether that is actually okay to do under that culture.
That's what the Jewish people did. So it's common practice.
Yeah. No. But the question was actually, if you expand it, what is a sin? That is probably, if you want to boil down what I'm saying to the core thing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so what in a way, sin is anything against God. To not go with God is a sin in itself, and that is on their own heads, is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Steve. Leslie?
Right. Still on the similar subject, but when the Jews opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I'm clear of responsibility. From now on, I'll go to the Gentiles. And it's like he left them to it. He went next door to the house of Titius Justus, who was an uncircumcised Gentile, I believe. Yeah. So it's like it was a moment that God allowed that to happen. And then Paul gets the vision to not be afraid, because he's got this atmosphere of opposition coming at him, and this wonderful vision that God gives Paul to not be afraid but to keep on speaking. So I see a sort of a tie-up there, that although there was the disadvantage, if you like, that he was opposed and left, But somebody benefited from that. That was Titius Crispus's advantage, that Paul then went to him next door. And then Paul gets this message from God to help him not to be worried, and he stays a year and a half.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's settled then by the word that God gives him, and advantages all round there.
Thanks, Leslie. Yep. So there's a, you know, Paul's confidence to stay there a year and a half. I don't know if that. I think he's led by the Holy Spirit and the length of time he stays everywhere. But sometimes it's persecution that drives him out. What's clear to him is it's not going to be persecution that drives him out, and his bold step, as Shing raised earlier, is very powerful. You know, in that it gives him peace, that the action he's taken, which seems divisive, but actually calls people to cross a line, calls people to step out of sin and towards Jesus, is actually a very powerful statement. And that base in Corinth. So even though opposition immediately arises soon after this, actually there's confidence that it's not going to become something nasty in Corinth, and I think that's an interesting thing. And Paul puts a lot of time into this church, or helping this church happen. Right, Steve, and then Shing.
Yeah, forgive me for my eagerness. It was something Leslie said. I thought, oh, it's so wonderful. Just something went inside me like a switch went on, and I'm not talking about a small one. A massive switch went on. So yes, thank you for the being afforded the opportunity to communicate this. I'll tell you what Leslie said is 6 words. You know, if you can grab hold of this, really what she was saying, it can blow your mind if it's for you. Okay, what are the words that everyone's saying? Do not be afraid. That's it, just changed it into 7. Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. I tell you what. Now, Leslie said Paul had this vision. Exactly correct. I'll tell you why this switch went on in me. I've had that vision. Blimey, that's a bold statement. I got even bolder. I have seen it physically. Now, that is like, oh wow, what's going on here? It's like my brothers and sisters, I'm sure they know this already. They know what happened to me. 6 weeks ago, I had a stroke. I was a man on the death row, and I came round under the under the help of the doctors, and they said, "Do you know where you are?" I said, "Yes," but I couldn't speak. Strangely enough, I knew in my brain. So anyway, I didn't say yes. I nodded. I'm going to get the facts correct here, and so let's start explaining obviously where you are, and of course somebody they said, "Oh, you can't speak and you can hardly walk." Yeah, nodded. Okay, and so anyway, there it is. If they've done that, explain it. Please.
Yeah, and Steve, you've been an incredible encouragement to folks, because I know you on Sunday came and visited us, and I know you spoke to some people who felt they'd lost their voice in more of a different way, and you said, "I know what it is to lose my voice, and I know how," and you just encouraged them. Through what you've been through physically, emotionally, spiritually, in all the things you've been through, you've been a tremendous encouragement, and your boldness and your pushing forward and your desire to be whole, I'm pretty sure, are coming about you're improving daily. It's fantastic, and it's a pleasure to have you on here, Steve. Yeah, thanks for that. And so when he says to Paul, don't be silent, speak, you're saying amen, go for it, Paul. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. That's precious as well. Shing?
God bless you, Steve. And, it's unfortunate sometimes these events happen, but hopefully it brings you closer to God and you can spread the good word to everyone from your experiences. Talk about a little bit different, actually. It was very good that you put a little bit of context into Corinth, because if you read the text itself, I don't know if it glanced over it, but it sort of ignored that. Whereas the previous passages, when they travel from place to place, there's usually some kind of summary about the atmosphere. In Athens there was idols, and here I don't know if it's intentional that it was left out, those things that you said, because it makes an impact. If they don't give you that information and you see that Paul just suddenly says that, I'm going to give up on you, you're beyond help. That's sort of what he's saying. Then it almost makes him appear as though he's a little bit weak in his faith at that point. Like he won't. But the interesting thing is that when God tells him not to carry on speaking, he actually stayed 1 year and 6 months, which my interpretation is that there's a lot of work to do here. So it supports that hidden all those things you told me about all the bad things that go on current, but it wasn't mentioned there. Mm-hmm. 1.5 years is quite a long time. And if you think about it, he gave up on these people and they didn't even drag him out and beat him. There's other places where they dragged him out and beat him and did a lot worse things to him. Put him in prison, put him in the middle of the cell. He didn't say those things. He just kept on praying in the city. Isn't it? So it's I feel like there's something, they're intentionally putting less there, so you have to think about it more. Or I don't know, there must be some rationale for not putting in those additional details, or having make you read from elsewhere.
So for example, I think you're hitting some very deep things here, Shing, in that if you live in a shame and honor culture, and a lot of the world does, 70-80% of the world does, the shame of Corinth is its reputation. I think by Luke not helping reinforce that by his letter, he kind of honors the church in Corinth. And I think there's some of that honor in that by not mention. It's like if you have a city that's got a bad name, or a town that's got a bad name, and people say, well, that's a rubbish place, and keep speaking bad about the place. If you know people who live in a town like that, and I do, where they always drag through the mud. Anything comes in the press, they drag through the mud. Anything comes up, it's just negative. They never mention that negative narrative. They're too busy trying to build the good that's in something. And I think that may be a reason why Luke doesn't mention Corinth. And also, it probably brings a sharpness of Paul's reaction. The Jewish people who know the stuff but won't listen, and this massively needy Gentile city that needs Jesus. Why is he sitting arguing with these few people here when there's many more people who need this? I think there's a lot of things going on. I think also the other thing in Corinth, and this is, so we learnt about Athens, kind of philosophy and all those things. As we get to Corinth is anything goes, anything happens, do whatever you like, no one's shocked, there's worse happening down the street. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of debased society where there's no judgment on anyone because everyone's doing whatever they like. And there's a bit of that in this as well. So in some ways, the reaction of people, the guy goes, oh, I don't care, really. He's a ruling power that doesn't care. He doesn't care what their argument is, and he doesn't care that they beat up the synagogue ruler outside in front of him. He doesn't care. Oh, there's worse things happening down the street. Oh, well, that's nothing. There's that kind of atmosphere of anything goes. I think there's a play about that as well, or a song, isn't it? In one of the things, anything goes. Yeah. We quite often end up tuneful when we've got people who are tuneful on here. Right, thanks, Leslie. David and then Leslie.
Yeah, just the characteristic of Corinth. It was a bit. I was going to say it's a bit like Liverpool, but it's. I mean, Liverpool's a wonderful place. Don't get me wrong. They had, I believe. I mean, nowadays there's a Corinth Canal, which sort of gives ships coming from Italy a very short cut to get through to Athens and into the Aegean. But in those days, I mean, they didn't. The trade routes. We talked about the trade routes some days before, but they had actually a ship railway, if I remember rightly, that went across. There's a very small isthmus. In fact, actually, there's a town called Isthmus just next door to Corinth, and so you've got ships coming there. They'd pull them across that short bit of land on a railway. That was built in something like 600 BC, I think, and the ships would come along through the Gulf, get on this railway, they'd pull the ship across and then put it back in the water on the other side. But you've got all these tough guys pulling these ships. You've got all the sailors. You've got a complete mix of characteristics, of cultures, it's a melting pot of all sorts of things. So yeah, I can understand how anything goes in that sort of environment, and it must have been a pretty tough place to actually be to establish a church, but nonetheless a very needy place for the gospel.
Yeah. So just sorry, I'm thinking the invention of the train. I'm still with Louis Stevenson or whatever. I'm just thinking
it wasn't a steam engine.
It wasn't a steam engine. So was it like they rolled ships on logs or something like that across a small place as a shortcut?
What I was reading was that it's a railway. It would be something that they could pull ships along.
A slipway, would it?
Sorry,
a slipway.
A slipway, but it was also. Sorry, hang on. I'll get that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a. Shush. So I'll give him a call in a minute.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen a picture of it. I wasn't there. But what I read was it's a railway. Whether that means it's a metal railway. I mean, the Greeks were very clever. I mean, look at all the statues that they created and stuff like that. You're already in the sort of. I don't suppose they had steel yet, but maybe it was a stone railway or something like that. And maybe they used logs, but I don't know what it was. But there was a methodology of pulling the ships out of the water, pulling them across, and then putting them back in the water on the other side, because it's only a short isthmus. And of course, then in the 1800s they built the canal, which is a very narrow one.
Yeah,
totally useless.
Well, it pays to have someone with shipping knowledge online. Thanks, David. I've got Leslie, then Steve, and then Shing. Go for it.
Well, I'm just thinking that is there anywhere on earth that doesn't need to hear the gospel? And was Corinth, I mean, I understand that Luke isn't, when you tell a story, either by writing it or by speaking it, you choose which facts to put in, and you just, if it's not relevant to the person you're speaking to, then you don't give all those details, and maybe that's what we're seeing here. I can't find much about Corinth. Actually, I've just had a little look. So I can't see that it's particularly bad from what I was looking at. But I mean, everywhere has got elements where we've mentioned sin, people who are not living for God, not acknowledging God. It's all around us. So I'm not sure that Corinth. I went with my son the day before yesterday to get his little boy's haircut. And we went to a barber in Flitwick, local to us. And each of the 4 barber's chairs had a video over the top of it. Mm-hmm. And it was fine to start with. They were sort of fairly innocuous music videos playing. But before, about 5 minutes before we actually left the place, those videos were, to me, highly embarrassing. And I was really nervous and worried. I just wanted to get my little boys out of there because they were blatant. They, you know, I'd almost call them pornographic. Mm-hmm. And that's the culture. This is in Little Flitwick. Mm-hmm. That I can't go to a barber because they have no concept of what they're putting. I mean, I'm just giving you a very small example of what we're having to deal with. And my son could see that I was very uncomfortable about this. And I might even go in today when I'm in Flitwick and just, you know, gently mention that I was very. There were about five or six children going through that barber shop for holiday haircuts. That's the world we live in. That people, unless you are a Christian, or unless you just happen to have good morals, which a lot of people do, anything goes. And it's so
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. And I think the words age appropriate are a very good phrase in those settings, as I found from time to time. I mean, there's other things as well, but thanks. Yeah, and I think that's something to, you know, it's society is like that, and I take your point. It's not just Corinth. Steve, and then Shing.
I'll be as quick as I can. First thing to say, I thank you for the beautiful words of my sister. I feel like I've got to lie down seriously and just, you know, divulge, you know, all those words. It's like a massive meal. It's a banquet in somebody's, you know, just whatever, you know, my sister was saying. But really, I could just, you know, it could take me a lifetime to just understanding and going into the depth of what was said. Anyway, so I haven't got a lifetime. Just get on with it, yeah. And I'm just going to say 2 small things, which are massive things that Leslie said. It was mind blowing. She said about, well, I'll just sum it off. Well, no, let me get this right. She started with a question. Is there anywhere on earth where you can't preach the gospel? And wow, what a big question. You know,
where it's not needed. Where it's not needed.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, you can phrase it how you want. I understood it's implicitly what you said, and that's right. I could even expand it, or go. You can think of it big or small. You know, I could add a bit myself. You know, is there anywhere on the earth or under the earth where the gospel is not preached? I'm saying that because there's obviously the answers to both in this great book we have called the Bible. The answers are there. If you just read the book, you've got those answers. You could, any question you got, go in the book and it'll tell the answers. Oh, I haven't got a copy of this book. Don't worry. The book goes in your mind, in your heart. Get it in your heart, and suddenly my mind is changed. It's a new mind. That's the gospel. So, you know, anyone, you know, I love questions. I love answers. Anyone wants to bring questions at the appropriate time, or answers, or even just think about it, go for it. One other thing Leslie said, which was incredible. Well, I'll just summarise what happened to her in Flitwick. Shame and honour. And actually, she was... In fact, I read the wrong point, but now look, it's linked to this other point. Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible tells us that Sodom and Gomorrah told us what it was. yeah, to find it so clearly, read the stories, blow your mind what was happening there, even if I read it now. And then Jesus said, "Oh, when you're coming back," I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I love being corrected. I think he said, "When I come back, it will be as the time of Sodom and Gomorrah." So what he's saying, oh, it's going to be like that again. So, yeah, I think Sodom and Gomorrah, from what Leslie said, correct me if I'm wrong, is implicit already. She saw it. She felt it. Anyway, I've got so much to say. I will mute myself.
Thanks, Steve. I'm glad you can mute and unmute yourself. It's good. Xing?
Muted. You're muted.
This is the tuneful thing we've been
Oh.
missing. Yeah, go for it, Xing.
I want to see what your thoughts are, but I'm putting it together, and if you read it in sequence, and I'm sort of going beyond what's in the text, or trying to get a little understanding what's going on. So he stayed there for a year and a half after initially sort of saying, I don't want to, I've given up here. God tells me I need to stay. I'll stay a year and a half, okay? Now, even at that point, even after 1.5 years of preaching the good word, there was a united attack against him. And it says a lot that, you know, that these people, even when their person in charge clears Paul of any crime, they choose to beat someone who's innocent. Okay, that says a lot. That what I perceive, I don't know if I'm right here, but in the previous passages, a lot of the journey and missionary work was to demonstrate there were problems here. It was an awful state, idols. There was magicians here preaching. It's really important to state how bad it was, because then they would say, we've converted all these people. We've done this. We've been able to show how bad it was and how good it was. In this circumstance, I feel like I almost think of Mark 4, where you have seeds being scattered, some scattered in the rocks like Corinth, some scattered in areas where they can grow. And Corinth, in some ways, is that example where if you read the text, other than maybe the Galileo who was able to be fair, there isn't anything to say they managed to persuade a lot of people to unlike the other circumstances where you had all the other characters. So it's a very interesting, my thoughts are, it's an interesting way of maybe saying they weren't as successful here, but not make it obvious. So you can read the text and you realize, oh, you know, they it wasn't so bad from a bad situation. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know if I'm over-interpreting it, but I don't know what your thoughts are.
I get what you're saying, and commentators, just to back you up on that thought, commentators would say Paul wasn't very successful in Athens, right? Because there's no mention of many people. There's 2 people mentioned or something. But actually there was a significant church in Athens, and there was significant things that happened. Luke just chose to be quiet about it. I'd say the same thing about Corinth. There's no massive mention of names. Sosthenes is mentioned. And if you go to the beginnings of 1 Corinthians, which is a letter Paul wrote to this church, he says, Paul, called by the will of God to be an apostle of Christ Jesus, and our brother Sosthenes, right? And so, in actual fact, what he's saying in the beginning of his letter, hey, I'm going to mention Sosthenes, who got beaten in that place, who became a Christian brother. And actually, you see there's some significant things that we don't just find in Luke's writing here, but when you put it into the context of other things that are written, you begin to see there was a sizable church in Corinth that had a lot of problems in rich and poor getting along, in all kinds of how you deal with immorality in the church, how you deal with all these things. Paul's writing into all those things in the church in Corinth. And so we know there was a significant church that required a number of visits from Paul, and I think 3 letters or 2 letters, on top of that. that we know of. We've got two of them in the Bible, but actually there's other things where he came and actually had to give some additional teaching. And so the church there had no lack of the Holy Spirit moving in the church, but they had a lack of wisdom in how they carried out about things, and Paul had to input some of that through his letters. So we don't know the full impact, we don't know numbers, but the mention of these places is something that we're not getting a full picture of the numbers. The numbers are not the criteria everything's measured by Luke. I think it's the impact and the reach, and some of these things are what he's actually expounding, how far Paul's gone, where he went, what happened there. And he's writing, if we look at the beginning of Acts, he's writing that in my former book Theophilus. So he's in my former letter, or my former writings, he's saying he's writing this to someone called Theophilus, who is someone he wants to know about all these things. And so that may be part of this. He's showing the reach, but I don't think he's counting the numbers. And I think the numbers at this stage are very hard to determine. But what's interesting is Corinth still is a city today. A lot of the cities that we've been looking at don't exist today, or are ruins. This city exists and has a football team, I understand. But Jenny, I'm going to go to Jenny.
Sorry, before Steve, I just want to say the last line just struck me, because Galileo just said that he cleared Paul of the crime, but yet he paid no attention to Sosthenes being beaten. So actually, he didn't stop the beating. I thought you do good in this sense, but you didn't stop the beating. It just struck me that ends on that note. But he did nothing.
He did nothing. And actually, in deciding the things with Paul, he just says, you sort it out yourselves. And then they beat Sosthenes, and actually he's going, okay, they've sorted it out. He probably needed a beating. Do you know what I mean? There's a lack of care, a lack of even being bothered about it. It's very unkind. But yeah, it's an interesting, I see the two sides of that. Thanks, Xing. Jenny, your hand was up for a while. Go for it, and then we'll go to Steve.
You're muted.
There we go. Thanks. We've missed your voice, Leslie. That lovely singing. Go for it, Jenny.
I thought it just shows God's heart, though, because you just think, well, they're not going to listen, won't. But He still wants them to be there to preach the gospel, and He cares so much about the church that was built there. And sometimes we just give up on things, don't we? But actually, when you press on, you get a result. But it's not really about being successful, is it? It's being about obedient to God. So, if you say there's still a church there now, obviously seeds were sown and they actually produce fruit. So it's just amazing. I just think it just shows God's heart. He doesn't give up on us, does He? Even when we go astray, even when people do wrong things, He's there, giving you another chance all the time. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, that is great. Thanks, Jenny. And yeah, go for it, Steve.
Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong. What's that thing called?
There's great joy at your comments, Jenny. Right, go for it, Steve.
Oh yeah, no, it's like, but I just reach for it straight away. It's like there's something should be bursting out from inside us. Jenny, it's mad. I can't even remember what Jenny said, but it doesn't matter. It's like whatever she said is awesome, because as soon as she opens her mouth, out comes the gospel. She can be talking about anything. What I love you. I don't know everything about you. I know minuscule about you. And it's like, you can talk about whatever you like. Knitting, cats. I love cats. Let's talk about cats. Let's talk about knitting.
Yeah.
Do you understand me?
Yeah.
Who cares? Let's just talk.
Yeah.
Actually, what he's talking is just like what God gave us to communicate with Himself through other people. It's like, just think about any simple thing. You just can't believe how big it gets. Anyway, before I confuse everyone, let me get to it. And none of this is off topic, because all our thoughts and our actions and our deeds need to be on topic. And if you're living in the Spirit, don't worry. There's no fear. I can concur. Whoever said that, Jesus said that. Oh, definitely I concur that. It's like, anyway, let's get back to on topic. And this is no respect to you, Jenny, because I know you love the Lord, and so do I. So yeah, just going back one step to our brother Shing. It was like it's like he was. I think in some sense of of course you're thinking about Corinth. I missed a bit. I didn't realise that I wanted it spelled out to me what was happening in Corinth. Let me say it was entirely right. Corinth was a filthy, disgusting place. It's Sodom and Gomorrah epitomized. And you know what? That thing went off inside me. Oh, what a wonderful place. I can't wait to get there. What do you mean you can't wait to get there? Because there's people that shouldn't be in that place. I need to get them out. Just like, Anyway, one other point, and I'm going to get off the airwaves because it's everybody's airwaves. Okay? Something is for our brother Shing, and it's for everyone. I thought about people that know me. I'm a man who loves words. Oh, great! He's a librarian. Yes, I'm a librarian. My Lord loves words. His name is the Word. Obvious. If somebody doesn't love words, don't even know God.
Yeah.
Right. So simple. Just to get to. I love words, especially the words of people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Significant words. Oh, which ones are they? Well, Jenny, Nigel, Shing. Insert name here. John. It doesn't matter whatever they called you, because God will use it for His glory. So Shing, just a quick question: do you know? Do you know what your word means? Why you were given that name? Have you ever thought and investigated it, or asked the Lord about it?
Xing is a translation from Chinese, and I mean I was given a Chinese name of Sing, and I translated to Xing. My brother has an English name, like Stanley, and he has a very different Chinese name. But the actual word Xing means sincerity, actually. I've always been tried to live an honest life and be truthful with what I do. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Okay, of course, and I agree fully. Because as I saw it, you're a guy that wants sincerity. You're searching truth clearly, and you want honor. And in one sense, there's nothing different about those words. Yeah, they're all different, but it's all again just shows you who God is. Yeah. So, I'll just add a bit to that, if I can. Go on. Xing is something you might not have talked about, and it's not a word. It's probably literal wordplay. Xing means shiny. Have you thought about that one?
Is that?
And also,
yeah.
Because I just thought, oh right, I love words. Let's have a quick Google. Oh, Google's evil, don't you know? No, Google's got the mind of God. That's what its name is. It means everything. I know everything. Right. Well, yeah, I paraphrase slightly, but Xing also means, and here's another option for you, Xing, victory. Man, what a name to give you. Anyway, I'm off.
Thanks, Steve. Steve, your love of words and your appreciation of words, having lost the ability to speak and regaining it, is your enthusiasm on each word. You just like absorbing it, enjoying it, and it's fantastic to watch. And I think, to add victory to that, sincerity is fantastic. I just want to we've only got 2 minutes left, and I want to just get to the kind of take home bits from today. So I think, Jenny, you were hitting some of this with what you said, I think my one on this would be, looking at. I think somewhere like Corinth, that Paul knew its reputation, knew what it was about, went there with the gospel, expecting the gospel to go for it. And actually, here in Corinth, he makes a decision that the year and a half he spent there wasn't sat in the synagogue anymore. He actually shook his clothes out and said, I'm going to the Gentiles. And so that year and a half's ministry was amongst the Gentiles and any Jews that chose to join in. And actually that's a very different approach to Paul in mission. And I think in us, there's that heartbeat of listening to the Holy Spirit. And no matter how dark somewhere is, we don't just label it dark and run away from it. We actually bring something and expect to change that darkness around. There's something we've got in God, and some of the darkest areas can become the brightest. And so that's my take home. It encourages me in that. I don't know what anyone else's is. Kitty, you've got a question. You've just sent me a text here. Do you want to ask your question? Then we'll go to Leslie.
I was going to ask you after, Nigel. I don't know if it's relevant. It's a kind of a personal thing.
Okay, we'll come back at the end.
Right. Well, I just want to thank Steve, because he really is inspiring me to speak out, to use my words. I'm a very, very silent person, and I've got to get it very hard even to speak out the word. So I'm just getting a revelation of that, the power of the word, but I have to speak it, I think. Because it says life and death's in the power of the tongue. I think I've just been lazy about it,
Thanks, Kitty. That's very open and honest and helpful, I think, especially to Steve, looking at the impact on his face. Leslie?
Just to reinforce that very, very quickly, it does say, do not be afraid, keep on speaking, do not be silent, for I am with you. And I think that's a word for us. But what I wanted to, the reason my hand is up is I'm a little bit confused by the end of this passage, because it says that the Jews made a united attack on Paul, brought him to court. Gallio wasn't interested because he's a job's worth, and his job was not to deal with their words and their complaints, because it involved names and law and things, and he wasn't about to judge things. But then he ejected them from the court. Why did they turn on Sosthenes, the synagogue ruler, and beat him when it was the Jews that were? I don't understand why the leader of the synagogue got attacked when it was Paul that they were complaining about.
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of possibilities. We're not told the exact reason, but I think one of the possibilities could be who would have had to bring the court case to the ruler. It would have been the leader of the synagogue who would have had to have brought that case, and for that case to fail, instead of blaming the ruler for the failure of it, they blame him for not bringing it right, or for not doing it right, or because he'd begun to listen to Paul. So there could be a number of different reasons there. I don't know if anyone's got any others you'd like to throw in.
Yeah, no, it's just nice to hear a few views really on that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to have you happy, Leslie. Shing?
I just want to offer some words of encouragement for people to speak up and not be silent, as Steve and Kitty have said. If you think about it, I mean, I can tell you a personal story about this, but if you think about it, what's the worst thing that could happen if you spoke up and said something? We're all Christians, and we're a open environment, and we're all forgiving people. The worst thing perhaps is being slightly embarrassed or saying something wrong, but we are humble and we make mistakes, and we're human beings, and we're not perfect, and we sin. So actually, the worst thing is the regret. If 1 hour from now I said, "Oh, I really should have said something. I didn't say something," that's actually more, because that'll linger on your mind. That so a thought came to my mind. I should have shared it. I didn't share it. Then that'll last with you. So that's what I learned. I mean the hard way, because when I was younger, I was quite shy as well. I was afraid. Oh my God, I'm going to embarrass myself by saying something stupid. Do you know what I mean? And then as I got older, I realized that actually other people can benefit from this. They may be thinking the same thing, but they're too shy to say about it. But when you look back at it, the regret in your life is a lot worse than the possible. And you learn that, what's the big deal if I embarrass myself? What's the big deal if I say something wrong? I did in good faith. I didn't try to harm anyone. So I hope that would encourage people to have a think and share and don't be afraid. That's all, as it says.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ching. Any other take homes from anyone? We are home, but yeah. See that point about to be made. Go for it, Leslie. I think you're about to say something. Are you?
No, I'm
Steve,
not. No.
Steve?
No.
Sorry?
Have you got a take home?
Oh, I was just checking our head, Steve. They say there's no dangerous questions. That was a dangerous question, because we can go on for another eternity. Because I'm in eternity already, so it's not dangerous there. It's only dangerous for people here, because they only got time. See, that's another fear. What is the worst thing? I have no time. See, Einstein will tell you that time is not what you thought. It's this. Anyway, you said take homes. And I got millions of them. Look, take homes. I'm in the takeaway, and there's so many bags. Just thank you for this banquet. But serious, it is, and it's not a joke. It is serious. Every amazing, if it comes out of a joke, praise God. People don't understand how heaven works. They're like, oh, what happens up there? It's here already in the church. What is the church? Is a model. It's the unseen things. Everything on earth is a model of the unseen things. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I better keep it down on earth. The guys floating away.
Well, I'm just looking at the time, Steve.
But
right, go for it.
To the point. You know what I mean. Now, this is for Shing, but it's not. Yeah, it's for everyone. Everyone wants that. Just say, yeah, it's all yours. Grab it. Right? Yeah. To succeed, to finish. Like, oh, what was that? Oh, yeah, it just popped up on my screen because I was looking at. Forgive me if I speak it wrong.
Yeah.
Sheng. That's your name.
I think.
So,
yeah.
It means to. Your name means to succeed, to finish.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Right, we're going to finish there. I'm feeling a little bit for Shing being put personally, but it's fine. We'll leave it there and we'll move offline. But thank you everyone for your contributions, and God bless you all. We'll just